Hi, it's Katrina. My friend David is going to be helping me out with the voiceover today, so everyone give him a warm welcome.
Number 10. The Order of Grigori. The Grigori were said to be celestial beings who fell from heaven. Once on Earth, they supposedly procreated with human women, subsequently creating the race of giant abominations called the Nephilim. These angelic beings appear in both the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, and the Nephilim are mentioned in the Book of Genesis. In Hebrew, the Grigori are known as the Irin or the Watchers, as we can see in the Book of Daniel. If the Bible is to be believed, these were literal angels that came down from heaven to watch over God's human creations. Their sole purpose on earth was to safeguard humanity and to watch over them. But once they were away from heaven, their hearts grew dark and they began to lust after human women. This lust corrupted them so completely that their leader, Samyaza, defected from heaven altogether. But God had never intended angels and humans to procreate. The children birthed through this unholy union turned out to be savage monsters. They pillaged the planet, ruined the natural environment, and endangered the pure members of civilization. God was so furious that he sent a great flood to rid the world of all its life forms, except those on Noah's Ark. Only with the last of the Nephilim gone could the world start anew. But there was a lot that happened between the Watchers falling in love with human women and God purging the world. The Book of Enoch says there were 200 Grigori in total. Samyaza was their leader, but there were others such as Batral and Azazel. After their corruption, they began to teach humans secret knowledge like how to make weapons to fight one another, the art of cosmetics to cover their faces, and even the unholy practice of magic. When things got so out of hand, it was obvious there would be no fixing it, so God got to work obliterating these so-called fallen angels. He gave Raphael the duty of capturing Azazel, the Watcher, who essentially turned into a war demon. Biblical texts say that Raphael threw the demon into a very dark place, a hole in a desert somewhere on the planet. It's said that the Grigori are still hidden away in the valleys of the earth, where they will remain until the day of judgment. Number 9. The many avatars of Vishnu. Hindu mythology is infinitely more complicated and some would say more colorful than Christian mythology. Take Vishnu, for example, one of the principal deities and most well-known divine figure. He appears in Hindu stories through his avatars, such as Rama and Krishna. He has 10 primary avatars that are called Dashavatara, though his appearances are said to be innumerable. He has over 1,000 names, which his worshippers repeat as an act of devotion. Imagine if every Sunday at church you had to recite the 1,000 names of God. In the early Vedic period between 1400 and 1000 BC, Vishnu wasn't really a big deal. He was more associated with the sun by early cultures. But as more and more stories were told, he began to be associated with various characters, such as a fish that saves humanity from a flood, and a particularly interesting dwarf. Then, when the Mahabharata became the primary source for mythical knowledge around 400 AD, Vishnu gained immense popularity. It's said that Vishnu can manifest a piece of himself anywhere at any time, but specifically when there's evil that needs to be defeated. His duty is to protect moral law and to squash demons. If you're a bit confused about what the whole avatar situation is, it means that Vishnu takes on various forms during his mission to restore cosmic order, and this typically involves beating up demons. Take the story of Rama and the demon Ravana, for example. Vishnu came to Earth and was born as Rama, with his primary goal being to destroy Ravana, who was a many-headed demon king with 20 arms, a physical representation of the very purest evil. Ravana ruled over the modern island of Sri Lanka and plunged it into chaos before Rama defeated him following a series of epic battles. And now for number 8. But first I wanted to give a big shout to Honey23B and Bootdink. Thanks so much for watching and supporting OE. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Number 8. Iblis, genie or devil. The Quran is unique in that it details the origin of evil in the Abrahamic faith. The Islamic tale is very similar to the Christian one, but with a few different twists and turns. In Islam, evil was born with the rebellion of Iblis, who was either an angel or a genie. Iblis became the main enemy of God, just like Satan in the Bible. It happened when he and the rest of God's angels were ordered to bow down to Adam and to worship him. This is unique in that Christianity doesn't explicitly tell anyone to worship Adam, only God and Jesus Christ. All the angels were happy to recognize Adam's supremacy, except for Iblis. He didn't bow down, but instead told God that he'd be a thorn in his side for the rest of eternity. He told God that he felt he was trying to bring him down by making him bow to a mere human. It was his pride that turned Iblis from a divine angel into a shifty devil. For the rest of the Quran, Iblis preys on human weakness, seduces them to evil, and is a generally malicious entity. But not every interpretation is the same. In many versions of the story, Iblis isn't the kind of angel you might have in your mind. In fact, in some faiths, he's considered to be a Jinn, a restless spirit created from pure fire. And when he refuses to bow down to Adam, God banishes him to hell. Some interpretations of the Quran say that Iblis is still in hell right now, while others say he's floating around the world causing trouble, and that on the day of judgment he'll be cast into eternal darkness. Number 7. Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda is an ancient supreme deity from the Zoroastrian religion. He's the Lord Spirit, the very highest deity worshipped in ancient Persia long before the days of Christianity. Ahura Mazda is the creator of the universe and all things that it contains, and a being of unparalleled goodness. Without Ahura Mazda, there would be nothing in all of existence. He is the absolute definition of an omnipotent god. This is according to Zoroastrianism, which is still a practiced faith. In ancient Zoroastrianism, Ahura Mazda was revealed to the prophet Zoroaster through a vision. Zoroaster left his home around the age of 20 and went to live in the wilderness while he contemplated the concept of righteousness and the idea of good against evil. One day as he was taking water from a well, Zoroaster was visited by an angel. The angel asked him what was most important in his life, and the man responded that he wanted to be righteous, pure, and wise. So he was given a vision of Ahura Mazda and his legion of archangels. During this vision, he was given the commandments and principles for what he would eventually turn into the Zoroastrianism religion. Unlike Christianity that came over 1,000 years later, the Zoroastrian god had an evil and malicious twin. Ahura Mazda's twin was Angra Mainyu, and he led an army of vicious demons called Daivas. He was the Persian version of Satan, with legions of angry spirits whose job was to create chaos among the human population and promote improper acts. These were basically imps sent to the world to cause havoc, inspire terror, and convince people to make poor decisions. According to the legend, when Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu were in the womb, Angra Mainyu was so eager to rule the world that he ripped open the goddess mother and burst forth prematurely. And even though God is typically depicted as omnipotent in most religions, Angra Mainyu was equally as powerful as his brother. He was a god himself, not just a fallen angel. In Zoroastrianism, it's believed that Angra Mainyu still exists to this day somewhere in the Iranian desert, where he rules as the source of all evil in the world. There's even a legend that he fathered a child named Zohak, who at one point in time ruled the planet like the Antichrist. Number 6. The truth of the Jinn. In the pre-Islamic world of Arabia, Jinn were the most terrifying mythological figures. The shape-shifting genies of Arabia were both angels and demons, either helping or tormenting the humans they encountered. Ancient Jinn could appear as anything from a snake to a scorpion or a lonely traveler on the road. This was long before the idea of angels and demons, so the Jinn weren't inherently good or bad. They were just spirits who could do whatever they felt like in the moment. Nobody really knows when the concept of the Jinn or genie first emerged. All we know for sure is that they were feared in Arabia long before the 7th century AD and the introduction of Islam. We just don't know how far back they go. People used to believe the Jinn controlled the weather and were responsible for good or bad crop harvests. Some people even claim to have a jinni which would follow them around and give them aid. Sunila Mubayi, an expert on Arabic literature, says poets used to attribute their best verses to their personal jinni. Jinn were such an important part of Arabic culture that the Prophet Muhammad even acknowledged their existence in the Quran. He said Jinn were immaterial beings with free will just like humans, and that one can't be Muslim without faith in the existence of these creatures. We don't know if almost 2 billion Muslims today share the same view, but that's what it says in the Quran. Those who do believe in the power of Jinn often associate them with evil, even though they're explicitly said not to be naturally malicious. These days they're called al-Ghaib, or the unseen, and people will have exorcisms when they think a Jinn has taken a special liking to them. Number 5. The Demons of Ragnarok. You've almost definitely heard the term Ragnarok before, the apocalyptic series of events in Norse mythology that signal the end of existence. But you might not know the real myth or what's supposed to go down when Ragnarok occurs. The truth is that Ragnarok is an epic battle between demons and gods. During this cataclysmic event, frost giants, fire giants, monstrosities, and demonic entities will get together to fight against the forces of good. The battle will supposedly be so intense that the planet will be destroyed in the process. One legend says that after the planet is obliterated, it will be reborn. Then the gods who fought for good will be able to exist once more. However, some scholars think this particular part of the myth was only added after Christianity to make Ragnarok more positive. The harsher reality is that the Aesir gods failed to restrain chaos. Even though they knew they'd be doomed, they marched into battle and were slain by unstoppable demons. Odin, Thor, and Heimdall were all apparently defeated at the hands of evil. Ragnarok is supposed to start with the death of Balder. After Loki kills Balder, events begin that will herald the end of times. What's really interesting is that during the Viking Age, people believed Balder was already dead. They thought they were living in the end times and that soon Odin would send the Valkyries to claim dead heroes for the final fight. It's a common theme that every generation seems to think they're living in the end of days. The Vikings thought they were about to take part in the final battle between good and evil, and these days you wouldn't have to look far to find someone ranting about the end of the world. Heimdall will blow his trumpet when it's time to fight the legions of chaos demons. This is very similar to how the angels blow their trumpets in the Bible when the apocalypse comes. Loki then leads his frost giants to battle on a ship made from parts of dead men. Unlike in the popular Marvel movies, Loki is a seriously bad dude in Norse mythology. He kills Odin's son Balder, starts the apocalypse, and then leads the charge against his fellow gods. Monsters and other giants join him, and so too do the beasts from the realm of the dead. After all the gods die in the fight, dragons are released to scorch what remains of the earth. What do you think prompted the Viking belief in Ragnarok? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 4. Mara and the Buddha. Buddhist literature is filled with hordes of supernatural creatures, just like ancient Hindu lore. But one of the worst beings in Buddhist scripture is Mara, a demon who's said to be the Lord of Death and the challenger of the Buddha. Mara is best known for his involvement in Buddha's enlightenment and is essentially the Buddhist version of Satan in the Garden of Eden. According to Buddhist tradition, Siddhartha Gautama was sitting in meditation when Mara came to bother him. If you're not familiar with this religious figure, he's the Buddha who, unlike most deities around the world, was a real historical person. Siddhartha lived between 563 and 483 BC, and even though legends can be unreliable sometimes, we know he was a real person. Some say he was a Hindu prince who renounced his wealth and sought enlightenment. Others say he was simply a spiritual leader who preached a path of peace and non-violence. Either way, he was the founder of Buddhism in India 2,500 years ago. And while the events of his life are likely blown out of proportion in the ancient texts, he did establish an entire religion before he passed on. But in reality, he wasn't necessarily special or supernatural. Siddhartha was a real man who grew old and died after becoming sick. When Siddhartha sat in meditation, Mara brought his most beautiful daughters to distract the soon-to-be Buddha. But no matter how stunning his daughters were, Siddhartha was unfazed. He was so deep in his meditation that no temptations of the flesh could entice him. This was when Mara sent vast armies of demons to attack him, but still Siddhartha remained peacefully in meditation. Legend has it that Mara believed the seat of true enlightenment belonged to him, not some silly mortal. The so-called Lord of Death grew so angry that he challenged Siddhartha, and at that very moment Siddhartha reached out with his right hand and touched the earth. Then Mara disappeared, and the morning star rose sharply in the sky, which was when Siddhartha realized he'd finally reached ultimate enlightenment. In that singular moment, peace and tranquility defeated evil, and Mara was vanquished. And afterwards, Siddhartha became the Buddha. Number 3. The twin gods of the Iroquois. In Iroquois tradition, they have their own myths about the good and evil forces in the world. Iroquois mythology speaks of the twin gods, the personifications of good and evil. The good twin was born normally, and he spent his life doing positive deeds. He helped people and generally tried to bring goodness into the world. The bad twin, on the other hand, wasn't born peacefully and thrashed inside his mother with such violence that she died giving birth to him. He then spent his life harming people and bringing dangerous things into the world. He was genuinely wicked, and he lied often to get what he wanted. And because he was so different than his brother, there was always a struggle between them. There are various versions of the myth. It was passed down orally for generations, so there are quite a few renditions. In one variant of the story, the twin gods created humanity together, with their opposing forces being the basis for creation and destruction. In other tales, the good twin was the creator of humankind, while the bad twin was the god of death. But in almost every version of the myth, the twins have the same outcome. They get into an epic battle, fight with each other across the planet, and in the end, the bad twin loses. He's then imprisoned underground in an inescapable chamber for the rest of eternity. Number 2. Shinto angels and demons. Demons are ever present in Japanese mythology. For thousands of years, stories of evil spirits, menacing ghosts, and bloodthirsty demons have been a part of Japanese and Shinto culture. Weirdly enough, most of the demons from Shinto legend are women. There are plenty of spirits and ghosts that are basically just angry or jealous women that are turned into monsters by some tragedy. A disproportionate number of folk tales in Japan are all about scorned women. For example, Kiyahime was a woman who was wronged by her lover, who transformed into a serpent that could breathe fire. She used her excellent sense of smell as a dragon to follow her ex-lover and burn him to death. Another demon from Japanese mythology is Yuki Onna, a pale-skinned ghost who stalks the snowy wilderness of Hokkaido. The demonic woman only appears to lost travelers in a white kimono during a heavy snowfall. She then blows on her victims so that they freeze to death before slurping their souls right out of their bodies through their mouths. This is only 2 examples, but there are many others. Hashihime, or the Maiden of the Bridge, was a woman that was scorned by her husband, who prayed to a god to turn her into a powerful demon. She wanted to vanquish her husband and murder the woman he left her for. She also wanted to kill all of their relatives to teach them all a lesson. Hashihime tied her hair into 5 horns, painted her body red, and then went on a killing spree. But what about angels? Why is Japanese culture so short of angels and so rich in demons? The closest thing to an angel in Shinto tradition is a tennin, the Japanese version of the Buddhist celestial nymphs known as asparas. These are loving spirits who occasionally enter the world of the mortals to perform a divine dance. They are not as benevolent as angels from other religions, but are mainly positive spirits who occasionally bestow blessings. They could kind of be seen as guardian angels, but they never really fight against demons or do anything dramatic. Number 1. Vahagn and Vishap. Armenian mythology is full of heroes and villains, as well as great beasts and strange legends. One of the most famous heroes is Vahagn, the Dragon Reaper. Nobody knows exactly where he came from, but scholars think he was likely a god of thunder or a god of sun and fire from the pre-Christian culture of Armenia. He was also associated with war, bravery, and triumph. Some scholars have compared him to Hercules from Greek mythology, saying they could have been based on the same person. He was worshipped inside vast temples built on the mountain slopes of rural Armenia, specifically at the chief temple of Vahagn at Ashtishat on Mount Karka. The custodians of the temple believed themselves to be the direct descendants of Vahagn. They really thought his blood coursed through their veins, but when Armenia converted to Christianity, things didn't go well for the custodians of the temple. King Tiridates III converted to Christianity in the 4th century AD, and shortly after, the Armenian church rose to power. The first head of the church, Gregory the Illuminator, went to Ashtishat and smashed the temple of Vahagn to smithereens. Then, on the site of the destroyed temple, a church to God and Jesus Christ was constructed. Vahagn was a heroic god with evil enemies. One of his primary foes was a breed of demonic dragons called Vishaps. These unruly creatures were said to be similar to the Leviathan, a great monster which also happens to appear in the Christian Bible. These dragons were said to roost near the peak of Mount Ararat and other tall mountains. They caused thunderstorms, blocked out the sun during eclipses, and sometimes hid in lakes like giant serpents. Blasphemers and heretics worshipped the dragons as gods, but in Armenian tradition they were evil monstrosities, and the only one capable of vanquishing them was Vahagn the Dragon Reaper. Which ancient mythology from around the world do you think has the most epic demons and angels? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!